Before apps knew your cravings better than you do, dinner in China ran on firewood, guesswork, and whatever survived the day. These meals carried people through wars, empty markets, and winters that did not care about feelings, while leaving their stories soaked into steam and soy. Here are 20 forgotten Chinese dinners that have faded into history. In the winter of 1878, in flood-ruined villages along the lower Yangtze River, Xiaofan arrived on tables like history's tiniest emotional support dish in a porcelain bowl. Sticky rice steamed in iron pots while brown sugar melted slowly over pine fires, filling homes with a warm, caramel atmosphere that briefly convinced people everything might be fine. It was not fine, but it smelled amazing. During the late years of the Qing dynasty, families safeguarded dried jujubes, lotus seeds, longan, and peanuts for this dish, the way modern society protects phone chargers. In 1912, in the narrow alleys of Shanghai, mothers arranged 8 toppings by hand for New Year dinners under dim oil lamps, like they were assembling edible destiny. Red beans for fortune, orange peel for long life, melon seeds for hope, raisins that had basically completed a world tour. The rice was packed tight, sweet and heavy against cracked chopsticks that had been through things. Children learned patience by staring down syrup as it thickened and darkened at a pace so slow it felt personal. Xiaofan tasted like winter being politely escorted out by memory. Ash, smoke, and sugar in its most powerful form. In cold northern villages, Jiong was a winter dish cooked underground, which already sounds dramatic and honestly a little impressive. A shallow pit was lined with hot stones and ash. A whole village chicken went in with ginger, scallions, and dark soy. Sweet potato chunks and dried mushrooms followed like a supporting cast that definitely earned top billing. Then the pot was sealed with earth and left alone to negotiate with the planet's internal thermostat. Hours later, the lid lifted with steam that smelled like wood smoke and pure survival. The broth ran deep and faintly sweet. The meat gave up immediately, to bare fingers. Families ate crouched by the pit, hands warming on clay bowls, looking like people who knew exactly how long winter could last. Jiong mattered because fuel was precious, and heat had to pull double shifts. Cooking inside the ground saved wood and fed everyone who showed up. Children learned patience from it. You waited, you listened. For the hiss. When it finally came, night felt manageable. Remember this quiet chemistry between fire and soil. It wasn't just dinner, it was central heating, group therapy, and hope in a bowl. Along the coast, Shao began with fresh squid cleaned at dawn. Ink redecorated the sand. Rings were strung on reeds and suspended over low fires of pine. Smoke flirted shamelessly with flesh, and salt robbed the sea. By sunset, the pieces curled like rebellious ribbons. They snapped when bent and glowed illegally amber in lamplight. To eat, they were flashed over flame, slapped flexible, and ripped by hand. The taste was brine and campfire with a sneaky sweetness at the end. Chewing went on and on. That was the entertainment. Shao mattered because boats were fragile and ice was mythical. Drying turned ocean into snacks. It traveled well in pockets and battled boredom between teeth on endless watches. Grandmothers judged dryness by drama. Boys learned to eavesdrop. Keep this noise alive. It is the shore gossiping after bedtime. In river towns, nothing wasted included skin, because when you live by the water, you learn fast that throwing food away is basically insulting the river to its face. Whoopee was invented after the good parts of the carp and grass fish were sold and only the nobody wants this bits remained. The skins were scraped clean, stretched on bamboo frames, and laid out like laundry for fish. Sun and breeze took shifts all morning doing the drying, unpaid and underappreciated. By noon, the skins looked like something you'd expect to trap ghosts in. Then they were sliced into ribbons and tossed into boiling broth with ginger, because if you're eating fish skin, you might as well do it boldly. The smell was clean like rain and vaguely confidence-boosting. The noodles turned glossy and dramatic at the edges, still springy in the middle, like they were auditioning for a food commercial. The texture was silky with an unexpected backbone. A splash of vinegar and a scatter of scallions showed up like backup singers and elevated the whole performance. Yupai mattered because in river towns, fish bones paid for school books and fish skin paid for dinner. Protein lived where city people saw trash. Mothers made it without announcements or applause, which is usually how the best flexes in history go. Children learn thrift by taste. When you slurp yupai, you don't just eat, you time travel. You hear water moving again and the sound of 1,000 grandmothers saying, "We don't waste in this house." Keep this craft alive in kitchens, not museums. Let skins continue their unlikely career as teachers. In village kitchens, Xiang announced winter before any calendar could, which is impressive, considering calendars had a whole job and still got outperformed by pork. Thick slabs of meat were rubbed with coarse salt, crushed pepper, and sometimes sugar, because even survival food deserves a little personality. They were hung from blackened rafters above the cooking fire, where smoke from pine and crop stalks slowly worked its way into every fiber, like an unpaid intern gaining experience. Days turned into weeks. The fat grew yellow and glossy. Eventually, the house itself became a seasoning, and also probably smelled incredible, or deeply suspicious. When a piece was finally torn down, it hit hot oil with a hiss loud enough to wake the ancestors. Smoke curled upward, and the air instantly switched from normal room to everyone is suddenly starving. The meat was firm and dense, smoky all the way through, salted deeply enough to convince you winter was just a rumor. Xiang mattered because pigs were valuable and winters took forever. Smoke became a pantry. Time became a tool. Every family had its own version, and absolutely no one wrote anything down because tradition preferred vibes over instructions. Children could find their way home in the dark by smell alone, which is either comforting or alarming, depending on how lost you are. And if the scent was right, you knew you were safe. Keep this fragrance alive. It is winter itself, quietly exhaling through wood and fire. Before sunrise, Doufu now lurked in village lanes like a delicious fog machine. Soybeans had been soaking overnight in clay jars, basically in bean pajamas, swelling dramatically in cold water. At dawn, they were dumped into stone grinders and bullied by hand until they turned into pale milk. The liquid was strained through cloth and trusted to a wood fire. When heat climbed just enough, a splash of brine slapped the surface into behaving. Within moments, white clouds showed up and collapsed into wobbly curds. The curds were scooped into bowls and dressed like they were going on a first date with soy sauce, chili oil, and wild handfuls of chopped scallions. Some people threw in pickled greens or dried shrimp for chaos and salt. The first bite was warm. The texture was softer than custard and emotionally gentler than your nicest aunt. It slid down easily and left heat behind like gossip. Doufu Nao mattered because it was cheap, filling and forgiving toward exhausted humans. Farmers inhaled it on the street. Children treated it like soup. Elders trusted it when teeth officially retired. Remember this bowl in hysterical modern mornings? It once taught whole villages to wake up without screaming. Lu Gu really got going sometime during the Qing dynasty, which is history speak for everyone was broke and soup was doing emotional labor. By the late 1700s, when the Qianlong emperor was busy being extremely fancy in Beijing, regular people were out here inventing soup out of vibes and leftovers. Lu Gu began after the market shut down and the floor finally stopped seeing human activity. Bones, sad greens, onion skins, and ginger scraps were all dumped into one iron pot, like a group project nobody wanted to lead. Nothing was measured. Nothing was turned away. This soup did not believe in gatekeeping. Water went in next, then fire, low and obedient, like it knew its place in society. Steam climbed into the rafters and curled around like it was trying to remember who it used to be. As the pot simmered, the liquid slowly evolved from questionable to maybe genius. Fat gathered on the surface and caught the lamp light like tiny floating coins, which was probably the closest anyone was getting to wealth that week. The smell was honest. No tricks, no marketing. The taste was plain and reliable, like that one friend who always shows up with batteries. It warmed without bragging and filled without picking a fight with your stomach. Lugu mattered because throwing food away was unthinkable and hunger was always lurking like an unpaid bill. Every scrap had value. Even peel and bone were still on payroll. Long before factory whistles started screaming in the mornings, tuan already owned river towns, especially from the 1880s through the 1940s, when breakfast still required fire and commitment. At first light, sticky rice steamed inside wide bamboo baskets over wood flames like it was practicing for a weather report. Pork belly simmered with soy sauce and sugar until it shined like it knew it was the favorite child. Pickled mustard greens were sliced fine. Youtiao was torn into warm ribbons like it had personally insulted someone. A square of cloth sat on the table, fully aware that its life was about to change. Rice went down first, then pork, then greens and oil, then bread. The cloth pulled tight and a fat white bundle appeared, instantly promoted to main character. The smell was meat and steam and 100 sleepy kitchens arguing with the day. The taste showed up in layers: sweet, salty, fatty, then smoke. Tuan mattered because it traveled better than human beings. Fishermen hauled it onto boats. School children tied it with string and stuffed it into sleeves like jackets were invented for snacks. In 1937, when war wrecked supply lines and rice prices climbed like they were trying to escape Earth, one bundle could carry a person through half a day. Not emotionally, just physically. Tuan warmed hands and locked shaky nerves into place. It didn't fix the century, but it did fix mornings. When you unwrap one, you open a real day again. Keep this bundle alive. It has been showing up on time for over 100 years and never once asked for applause. Night yum cha truly belonged to the 1920s and 1930s, when southern port cities stubbornly stayed awake and cooks worked by lantern-like night shift magicians. Around 1925, tea rooms in places like Guangzhou and Hong Kong started opening again near midnight. Bamboo lids clacked like impatient fingers, kettles whispered secrets, dock workers drifted in from boats, cooks slipped out from back kitchens. Mahjong tiles clicked along the walls, keeping score on absolutely nothing. Small plates rolled in first, hair gao glowing with shrimp, turnip cake crisped in pork fat, chicken feet swimming in soy like they'd made questionable life choices. Tea poured high and amber, the air smelled of leaves and hot oil, conversation stayed warm and underwater, quiet. A man could order congee at 1 in the morning and still wander home by 3. On sticky summer nights, in 1932, tables were dragged closer to doors to steal air from the river. Night yum cha mattered because days were long and the night refused to cooperate. It gave laborers a second dinner and old men a second chapter. It kept streets from falling asleep too early. Remember these hours. They taught cities how to stay awake in the dark. In the villages outside Suzhou during the 1910s, geng meant the day was officially over and everyone was allowed to stop pretending they weren't tired. When bell towers went quiet and canals held nothing but moonlight, families gathered leftover rice, gloomy greens, and one heroic scrap of pork fat. Grandmother Li Yulan, documented in Shitang Village Records in 1914, ran the operation from a dented iron pan that had already survived 3 generations and was not impressed by complaints. Cold rice got crumbled by hand, then shoved into hot oil with garlic and chopped mustard leaf. A splash of rice wine followed like a dramatic entrance. Steam shot up, sharp and sweet. The sound arrived first. Rice clicking against iron like it had something to say. Then the smell. Old grain waking up from a very long nap. The taste was humble and clean, warmed with smoke and salt. Geng mattered because winter did not care about feelings. Food had to come back as something new. Children learned that waste came with serious side-eye. Elders taught without speeches. One bowl, one story, one quiet fire. In the thin years after the floods of 1921, this dish fed more than stomachs. It fed stubborn dignity. Remember this pan and its persistence. It once made leftovers feel like tomorrow. In the Red Earth Hills near Ganzhou, in Jiangxi, Jia San ruled harvest nights in the 1920s. After rice was threshed and baskets stacked, families fried whatever the fields had spared. Pork skin, river fish, wild taro, and bean curd skins piled into a single wok. Uncle Chen Weiming, famous in Luoxia town for his furious cleaver, cooked it behind his tea stall in 1926. Oil smoked blue like it was showing off. Ingredients dove into the pan by handful, not permission. The air turned thick with starch and fat. Crackle replied to every toss. The taste was chaos and comfort. Crisp corners, soft middles, fire from dried chilies. Jiasan mattered because it celebrated surviving, not spending. It turned scraps into fireworks and steam. Men ate standing. Children scorched tongues and laughed. On autumn nights after the 1929 drought, the dish still showed up, small but glowing. Memory says it fed stubbornness as much as hunger. Tea once made hardship ridiculous enough to laugh at. In Beijing's Qianmen district in 1912, Bing Tai ran mornings before the city bothered to wake up. At a stall run by Zhao Shunfa near Zhoushiku Street, iron griddles complained from dawn. Dough made from wheat and warm water got rolled thin, painted with sesame oil, then folded again and again like it owed money. Scallions were trapped inside like green stowaways. Each cake met the pan without drama. Oil snapped. Steam escaped. Fauju stew bubbled in inland kitchens when the sea and shops felt imaginary. In 1934, at a farmhouse outside Liuyang in Hunan, Madame Zhou Qinghua cooked it for threshers during autumn rest. Dried bean curd skins soaked until it relaxed into pale ribbons. Pork ribs dove into a clay pot first, then ginger, dark soy, and well water. Fauju drifted in last, floating like laundry. The pot stayed low for ages. The smell grew rich and comforting. Oil gathered along the edge like it had paid rent. When served, the skins had gone silky and deep brown. They tasted of pork and bean in unhurried time. The mouthfeel was soft, with a faint chew that demanded respect. Fauju stew mattered because meat was scarce and beans were loyal. It stretched flavor across days and carried warmth into cold bones. During the drought of 1937, Zhou fed neighbors from this pot. Bowls came back shining. Remember this stew? It is thrift-wearing kindness. In Chengdu's Jingyang district in 1898, Wansan feipian was slung from a narrow cart by Liu Wansan himself, a man famous for a sharp knife and a red apron that meant business. Offal showed up before dawn from the slaughter lanes. Heart, lung, and tripe were dunked in cold well water, then simmered with ginger and cassia until they gave up resisting. Leah sliced everything thin as gossip and fanned it wide in blue bowls. Chili oil came next, glowing with crushed peppercorn and sesame. The smell landed first, warm spice and iron. The taste followed in waves. Heat, numbness, depth, then sweetness sneaking in at the end. Wansan feipian mattered because it turned ignored parts into workday treasure. Students from nearby academies combined pocket money for one plate. Porters ate standing. In the summer of 1903, after floods emptied markets, Liu kept slicing and selling. Hunger met fire and lost the argument. Remember this knife work and its nerve. It taught a city how to season struggle into pride. Shuiju fish fired up near Chongqing's Kaohsiung Men docks around 1931, when river smoke and red broth shared the sky. Chef Ma Zhenhai served it in a tea house above the Yangtze, grabbing carp straight out of baskets. Fillets were cut thick and salted like they meant it. Chilies and garlic exploded in hot oil. Then broth went in, loud and dramatic. Fish slid in last and disappeared under a lava blanket. The surface glittered with chili oil and drifting peppercorns. The smell poked your face. The taste rushed in hot, then waved politely into sweet. Flesh stayed white and tender. Shuiju fish mattered because boatmen needed fireworks in their stomachs. One bowl could elbow through damp chill and long shifts. During the winter freeze of 1934, Ma kept his flames high and his door wide. In 1926, on a narrow lane behind the ferry steps in Hankou, Xiaofan jump-started dock hands before dawn. Madame Lu Xiuhua woke at 3 to rinse rice in river water, then bullied a clay pot into boiling. Yesterday's millet porridge reheated beside it. Pickled radish got chopped tiny. A single salted duck egg weighted like royalty, halved to feed 4. Rice hit bowls first, porridge followed, thin and steaming. Radish added snap. Egg brought yellow luxury. A flick of sesame oil made the whole place breathe. The taste was simple and comforting, with salt blooming last. Xiaofan mattered because money was shy and work was loud. It filled without slowing fingers. Sailors ate leaning on posts. Children drank it like sunrise. When floods wrecked markets in 1931, Liu kept her pot alive with borrowed grain. In the winter of 1935, a tiny shop outside the south gate of Lanzhou fed muleteers rolling in from the Yellow River Road with Qingtang, New Rao, and exactly zero nonsense. The butcher, Ma Shula, split shank from knuckle before sunrise, then rinsed bones until the water gave up its secrets and ran clear. Into the pot, they went with only ginger and salt. No distractions, no extra guests. Hours rolled by, while the steam quietly improved itself. Slices of beef waited in bowls. Clear broth poured over them, shining like polished glass. Cilantro and white radish settled on top like finishing touches. The smell was spare. The taste rounded out the mouth and spread outward like borrowed warmth. Jing knew roux mattered because chilies cost too much and winter cost more. This soup paid heat up front. During the brutal cold of 1937, Ma fed drivers on trust. Most came back when roads opened to settle debts and shake his hand. In 1929, along the farm lanes outside Kangzhou, Baozi, stuffed with fermented chives, announced late autumn had officially arrived. At dawn, Jiang Meiying lifted clay crocks from beneath straw. Inside, summer chives had gone dark and sharp through salt and thyme. A little minced pork joined only when luck felt generous. Dough rose in wooden tubs near the stove, puffing quietly like it was trying not to wake anyone. Rounds were packed, sealed, and stacked in bamboo trays. Steam rushed upward. The buns ballooned and shined. When split, green filling struck the nose before it struck the tongue. Sour came first. Sweet flour followed behind like an apology. These Baozi mattered because gardens do not last, and patience sometimes tastes better than meat. During the drought of 1931, Jiang fed neighbors from a single basket at a time. In 1933, on a narrow street beside Foshan's ancestral temple, rice noodles were cut by Chen Guixing exactly at noon like the world ran on his watch. Rice soaked since nightfall was ground wet and poured onto hot cloth, stretched tight across a steamer. Sheets appeared on command. They were lifted and sliced into long white bands. Noodles slipped into bowls with beef broth or sweet soy and oil. Their surface caught light. Bites stayed soft but refused to collapse. The air smelled of rice and rising heat. Xiaofan mattered because wheat never felt at home here. Rice took over the job. On storm days in 1936, Chen added broth for the boat boys. They left rubbing bowls clean with their thumbs. In 1942, in a river neighborhood of Lashan, Zha Jinhua heated alleys during chip ration days. Cabbage and winter greens were shredded on low stools. Sweet potato starch stirred into well water until it went pale and obedient. Bunches of greens were dunked and lowered into iron woks of rapeseed oil. The first contact exploded into bubbles. Leaves curled and crisped. Each cluster came out blooming like it had plans. The smell mixed smoke and green life. Edges shattered on impact. Centers stayed soft with a whisper of sugar. Jia Jinhua mattered because meat was rumor and color was joy. A pocket full of coins bought fire for the mouth. Teenagers hunted the darkest pieces. Mothers folded leftovers into evening bowls. During blackout evenings in 1944, friars glowed behind shields.